Christian McCaffrey goes down. Justin Fields goes down. David Montgomery goes down. What's happening here with all the injuries in week 6? It's fantasy football fallout here as we begin another edition and another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. And it is time for our reaction show here, looking at all the action that happened on Sunday of week 6. And Michelle, I'll bring in my co-host here in a second. When I'm not doing this, I'm Vinnie Iyer. I'm also writing for sportingnews.com. You can find me with the NFL betting and fantasy. And Michelle, I'll turn to you. What a devastating week of injuries here in fantasy, and that's what's going to dominate our show today.
I mean, it was absolutely just devastating to a lot of people because these injuries, especially with David Montgomery and Justin Fields, those happened before you even got any points from them, right? Yeah. So it's not like at least Christian McCaffrey got into the end zone. He had a little bit of yardage. So, yeah, you didn't get a typical Christian McCaffrey game before the injury, but you got something out of him. But now looking forward, we don't have much information on McCaffrey's injury. He suffered an oblique injury. He tried to play through it. Like he went out and then he came back in for one touch, couldn't handle it, and then went into the locker room and then was ruled out. We don't have much information on it yet. Obviously, if he misses time, Jordan Mason would be the hot pickup off of waivers if you didn't have him as your handcuff insurance policy on your roster. But the 49ers in general, their offense was really, really bad against the Browns. I'm putting it more towards it was in Cleveland. It was against a really hard defense. I think overall they'll be all right moving forward.
Yeah, let's not forget that Trent Williams was hurt after the game, as well as Deebo Samuel. So a lot of attrition hitting the 49ers as they play the Vikings here. Week 7 Monday night, it is a favorable defensive matchup, so we can look forward to that. But yeah, I think Jordan Mason right now is the preferred guy to Elijah Mitchell. He was active for the game with a knee injury. You'll probably see Tyrion Davis-Price made active for the next game, assuming McCaffrey misses that. They do have a bye in week 9, so there's a chance you might not see McCaffrey for a few weeks, no matter the severity of the injury, and be careful with that. So something to look at. We do need to talk about some other injuries here before we do that. I will tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Michelle, we will talk about some other injuries here. Justin Fields, look, just when things were going great for Justin Fields as a passer, he was putting together the numbers. This matchup was looking great against the Vikings. Then he goes down and Tyson Bagent takes over. And it's a bummer. It's a right thumb injury. So I don't know if we're going to see him for a while.
Yeah, I mean, he said he wanted to play. He was trying to play, but he couldn't squeeze the ball. And I don't think that's going to change very quickly. And it stinks because he's had, the Vikings matchup was supposed to be great. I know he didn't really do anything, but I feel like Justin Fields scored so many of his points in the second half anyways. Like, I think he would have came up with an okay game if he were able to stay in. He has nice matchups coming up, but you're not going to be able to trust him if he can't squeeze a football. But, I mean, and you don't even really have a backup option because you don't want to play the Bears backup quarterback, and then their running backs are all injured. Deonta Foreman was all right, but it's not like you were super pumped if you played him. So, yeah, it's just not looking pretty with the Bears right now, and I don't think you're going to be able to trust any of them. Like, you don't want to play DJ Moore probably either with Bagent, however you say his last name, starting for the Bears.
Yeah, it could get ugly this week because Jimmy Garoppolo was also hurt with a back injury and he had to go to the hospital. That's the matchup this week, Raiders and Bears. So we could see Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell versus Tyson Bagent. So get ready for that matchup potentially this week. It's pretty ugly here. You're right. Justin Fields, look, Bagent tried to keep them in the game, but you didn't see much going on from their offense. Cole Kmet disappeared with no Justin Fields. So, oh boy, it's ugly. And we were looking at it. Sometimes it's too good to be true, right? McCaffrey was scoring in every game. He scored in the game he got hurt in as well. He goes down. Justin Fields had this dream stretch of matchups that he's probably not going to get a chance to exploit now. So file those under unfortunate. And I think you also have to do this with David Montgomery. I mean, he was rolling, right? There was no Jahmyr Gibbs. He was on the shelf. And now Montgomery gets hurt with a shoulder injury here. So rough break. It was a tough matchup against the Buccaneers, and he had trouble running early. He did have one nice reception there early, but you didn't get the results. And what's worse is Craig Reynolds came in and he didn't look all that great. I think part of it is a matchup. They get the Ravens this week. Not a great matchup. I mean, Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears had some success. It's not, I think it's about average here this week. And I don't know, Craig Reynolds is Craig Reynolds for a reason. So I don't know. We'll see if Jahmyr Gibbs can come back. But last time Montgomery missed, it wasn't a lot of Gibbs. It was still Craig Reynolds. So I don't know. I think they might have to go out and get somebody here if this is getting pretty dire. But it's a bummer because he was just rolling up numbers here. And look, Michelle, he was an every week guy. So I think the reports early say he is going to miss time, and probably more so than last time.
Yeah, it does sound like he's going to miss time. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs sounds like he should be back next week. So maybe they'll just interchange them out and Gibbs will get more work. Because, like you said, Craig Reynolds did not look good at all. So I do expect most of the touches to go to Jahmyr Gibbs. So if you drafted him, and it's been a struggle, right? He hasn't been good. He's been out with an injury. And now you get to plug him back in. And I would, because we're going to get into all the buys and the injuries and the mediocre running backs that we're dealing with. You're going to have to play Jahmyr Gibbs. But I do think this also pushes up Jared Goff a bit. We saw him have a nice fantasy day on the road, which is not typical for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 15 targets, Sam Laporta 11 targets. So I think overall this just bumps up the passing game. And against the Ravens, they might have to even pass more. And I think that's okay for Gibbs as well because he can get more reception. So I really like Gibbs moving forward now, but stinks if you have David Montgomery.
Yeah, this is part of the factor that I had considering when I had Gibbs so high. That David Montgomery's had a strong history of injuries going back to Chicago days. So I don't know if he was going to hold up. And I don't understand why they were giving him this massive workload early in the season. He's not a guy known for holding up, right? He always misses time when you look at his history with the Bears. So a little bit disappointing that it caught up to him here. So Gibbs, we'll see if it turns out to be that they just let him roll here. But I don't know. I don't know how you cannot get Gibbs going for the Lions. They've been reluctant to trust him here so far. They got to go. And you're right about Goff. I mean, look at what happened. I mean, Jameson Williams was there to make big plays. Amon-Ra, Laporta, Josh Reynolds. You saw the whole weaponry. Even Marvin Jones did a little bit of something in that game. So you saw the whole weaponry there. So that's a good call by you, Michelle. That I think you bump up Jared Goff. I think this pivots to be a little bit more of a passing team. But we have some more storylines we will discuss in our next segment. But Michelle, I mean, those three injuries, they don't get much bigger, except we had several last week with Justin Jefferson and all that. So I don't know. I think we just want to get through week 7 without these type of injuries.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk about a wide receiver who disappeared this week, a wide receiver who actually came through. And then towards the end of our podcast or this episode, we'll get into those stinky running backs and what to do during the bye week. But first, let's hear from a couple of our sponsors. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, you just create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This episode is also brought to you from Prize Picks. Do you love playing daily fantasy? Try out the Prize Pick app. Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. At Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. They offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. And that's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy app. Also, you don't have to stress about player injuries, which is huge. With the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and CFB top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Vinny, we need to talk about the Jaguars, because Trevor Lawrence, fine, mediocre performance again. We should expect that from him by now. But Calvin Ridley, what is going on? It's like he finally puts up a big game last week, and then he has an amazing matchup against the Colts and completely disappears. Tell me what to do with Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And you know what's happening here with the Jaguars is that Travis Etienne is becoming really special and scoring long touchdowns. Remember, that was his biggest issue. Can he get the ball? But now he's scoring twice a week. And if your running back is scoring, why do you need your wide receivers? And what's happening as well, Jaguars defense is playing really well. So what's happening is they're having big leads. They're not throwing back and forth with these teams at all. And the Jaguars are content. Hey, we're winning this game. We're blowing them out. We don't need to do anything here to go away from our game plan. So I think that's coming into play. But also it looks like they're okay if it's just a Christian Kirk week, right? Or we're just going to throw to Kirk or Ingram and not force Calvin Ridley into it if that's not what the matchup dictates. But we saw it maybe in week 1. The Colts just gave up too much to Ridley and they made him the center of attention here. But I just think part of it is, again, the game script got away from them. And when you have a running back bursting into the end zone, you're going to have less opportunities to score touchdowns. And Ridley is a good touchdown scorer. So a lot of his value is tied to that. So, look, the Jaguars an interesting team. I can't say that I'm too inspired. There's a low total this week, Thursday night, going into New Orleans. So I think you'll see a lot more of Etienne. He's from Louisiana, so he's their hot hand right now in this offense. And again, their defense also figures to play well against Derek Carr. So if these scenarios keep happening, I think the Jaguars are okay. I don't want to say winning ugly, but just winning without the style points, right? They're not going to force it. Okay, we got to get Lawrence and Ridley to hook up 3 times. They don't care about that. I think maybe the Bengals might to say, oh, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have to get going. But I don't think this is a priority as long as the Jaguars are winning games this way. And look, you can't argue with their reality results. So look, until they are in a shootout in reality, it's going to be really hard to trust them here. And it's funny because they've played a low-scoring game against the Chiefs. The Bills game wasn't necessarily a big shootout either. So maybe it's the way they want to play, and that's what's happening here with the Jaguars passing game.
Yeah, now we're dealing. Trevor Lawrence suffered a knee bruise really late in that game. He didn't come back, but they were already up like 37-20 or something at that point. So there is no need for him to come back. It is a really short week, so we'll see if he is good to go by Thursday Night Football. I think that's huge for all the pass catchers. Not necessarily. I don't want to play Lawrence necessarily in this matchup, but it would be huge for the pass catchers. Calvin Ridley still led the team with 8 targets. It's just like Lawrence and Ridley decide, I don't know, one week they have that connection and the next it completely disappears. So Ridley's one of those just boom bust type plays. If you want to keep playing him in, he has a high upside, but he also has a low ceiling. Let's talk about the Jets offense. I feel like they're starting to click. I was saying while watching the game, like Zach Wilson looks better. And then you look at his stats and it's like, okay, it's really nothing special. But for Zach Wilson, he does look better, right? You're obviously not considering him for fantasy quarterback, but it's helping Garrett Wilson. He had a really solid game, 8 receptions, 90 yards on 12 targets. Breece Hall, efficiency on the ground wasn't there, but it was a super hard matchup, but he got it done with the touchdown and then 5 receptions for 54 yards. That's exactly what we wanted to see. He's on the field a ton. They are limiting Dalvin Cook's snaps and touches, thank goodness. But fortunately, they get the bye this week, but then they get the Giants and the Chargers after the bye, which I think you're just going to keep plugging in these guys.
Yeah, this is a nice developing story where we kind of just buried the Jets, but they've come back here pretty strong. They're putting up decent numbers. They're putting the ball in the hands of their 2 best playmakers. Why wouldn't you? These are your second-year stars. Get them the ball. Don't worry about getting other people the ball. If Al Lazard and these extra receivers aren't doing anything, don't give them the ball. Dalvin Cook, don't force them in there. Pretty much it's these 2 guys and Tyler Conklin. That's where I want this offense kind of going through. Like, you don't need to work in any of these guys. When Breece Hall can explode, Garrett Wilson can take over games, even in tough coverage here. So, look, you're going to ride those Jets. Yes, it's the only unfortunate thing is they have a bye. Who would say that? Here it's like,
Yeah,
oh, we're going to miss the Jets' offensive pieces. It's a bye. What do I do to replace Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson? But that's a good thing, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, you probably get a little bit more if Aaron Rodgers was in there. But look, you got to take what you can get. And this is a pleasant surprise when we were so down after Rodgers went down. Now, interesting development here with the Rams. Now, Kyron Williams was slow down against the Eagles, but he gets going. Cooper Kupp, second game back. I guess it took him only 1 game to get warmed up. He dominates here in production. Interesting that the Rams didn't throw enough. I thought they were going to throw a lot, but then the Cardinals decided not to show up at all offensively, so they just kept running and running with a lead. And this is my concern sometimes with Matthew Stafford is that they were content running. If they go up big, and they got up big here pretty quickly with the field goals and all that, they were able to pull away from the Cardinals, who were just terrible. They didn't provide any resistance in this game. So Kyron looked great. We'll see about the injury. They also had Ronnie Rivers get hurt. Kyron had an ankle. Rivers had a knee. And then you had Zach Evans come in for a little bit. So hopefully Kyron is okay. That's what Sean McVay said. But look, they just fed him and Cooper Kupp pretty much and just said, hey, try to stop these guys. You couldn't do it. That was the end. So Puka Nacua had some opportunities. They threw to him in the end zone a few times, but quite his game, but still had 7 targets in this game. So still healthy number. If he catches one of those touchdowns, you're in business and you're all good here. And you like Stafford's game a little bit more as well. So I think it's just one of those things here. And Stafford, again, maybe the Rams are too good in certain cases where this week they're getting the Steelers. So that'll be an interesting matchup at home. Do they have to put the ball up a lot, knowing that it could be a low-scoring game? I mean, that's not great, right? So that's my only concern. But in terms of the percentage of usage, I think Nacua is still fine in relation to Kupp. And you have to be pleased with Williams right now, continuing to do this even in tough spots.
Yeah, I know some people might get a little bit concerned about Puka Nacua because Cooper Kupp had the massive game and Puka only had 26 receiving yards. But Stafford only threw the ball 24 times, and 16 of those attempts went to either Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. So 9 to Kupp, 7 to Nacua. I'm not worried about it. You keep plugging in both of them. Cooper Kupp's looking amazing, and that's great because you drafted him and then you didn't have him for the first 4 weeks, but he's making it up now. And the Steelers are just a fantastic matchup. They're allowing the 3rd most receiving yards per game to wide receivers this year. They're allowing the 4th most rushing yards per game as well. So Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, all great. I don't know if I want to trust Matthew Stafford in that matchup. You might have to with the bye weeks and the injuries, but the wide receivers and Kyron Williams, I'm all go week 7.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to go. And look, I don't know what to do with the Falcons offense, Michelle. I had Bijan Robinson. It's interesting that you look at the running backs that we took early. Christian McCaffrey's now hurt. Nick Chubb is hurt. We're not sure what we're getting from other running backs that we took really early. Derrick Henry has been up and down. Bijan, we took really high, and he's not delivering to those expectations. Right now, I think he's still in the top 10 in scoring in half-point PPR, which is okay, but you didn't draft him to be the 10th running back on the board. You drafted him to be the top 5, top 4 running back, and I don't know what's weird about the Falcons. All of a sudden, they're getting in love with passing. All of a sudden, it's not just Kyle Pitts, but they're getting Jonnu Smith. Both Smith and Pitts scored against the Commanders. Go figure. Drake London all of a sudden has been unlocked in the passing game. Desmond Ridder, a little bit more confidence throwing the ball. And what's happening here is maybe teams are just saying, hey, we're going to dare Desmond Ridder to beat us with his arm. We're going to take away the running game as much as possible. And this is also concerning because they're not really working at Tyler Algier. We thought week 1, okay, it's going to be a split here, but they're not really working him in except in a few spots. So Bijan, I think, is maybe a victim of just this offense being so up and down with Ritter. And thankfully, he's getting done in the passing game to really help his numbers here, because without that, it would be pretty ugly here. So I don't know what to do. The Falcons are playing the Bucks this week. It's a tough matchup for the running game. I don't think all of a sudden they get on track. So I don't know. I want Bijan to live up to your lofty expectations. I have him. I want 15 to 20 points, not 10 to 12 points from every week.
Yeah, we definitely need more. We need more touchdown opportunities. I mean, when
Yeah.
they get around the goal line, still Algier, I don't understand. He's not like Algier doesn't look good, but they're still feeding him like crazy. And like you said, the Buccaneers this week, Tennessee, Titans the next week after that. But I mean, Bijan, you can't consider sitting Bijan. I
No.
mean, there's so many bad running backs right now. It's very doubtful that you have two of them that are better than Bijan Robinson on your roster. Like you said, luckily he's coming through somewhat with the receiving, but it's not what we wanted from him. He has to start scoring those touchdowns for us to feel like he was worth that early pick here. But yeah, like we'll get into more stinky running back play here in the last segment.
Yeah, it's pretty bad out there. And yeah, it's like anything you did basically running back. If you went zero or middle, like you're not immune to some of the issues that have popped up here. Unfortunately, no one is. It just happens, and maybe this is why running back's just not a great investment overall in reality or fantasy, at least early on the board. And we'll get into that here in our final segment. Just run down some of those guys that are really struggling for your teams. But we got to hear from another one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why, like with all teams tight-knit that are looking to have success and a winning program, you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And really, it's easy. Just go to LinkedIn Jobs. You can build a job and spread the word that you're hiring pretty quickly. You just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread that word. Simple tools such as screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. So that's how you get the right mix there for your small business, just like a winning team put together the best lineup there. It's why small business rate LinkedIn Jobs number one, delivering quality hires for leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. It's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show. We call this our starting 11, really roughly, to kick off the week every week on Locked On Fantasy Football. So we kind of set the table to transition from week 6 to week 7. So looking forward here to turning the page from this tough week. Now, one of the struggling running backs we teased about here before we got to the break was Jonathan Taylor. I don't know what's going on. He was ineffective. Zach Moss scored and saved his value there against the Jaguars, but I don't know. It seems like now they're looking at committee. They paid Jonathan Taylor. It seems like they're working in Moss still in key roles. So I don't know if it's going to ever flip here to what we want. If you're a Jonathan Taylor manager, maybe you still like it that Zach Moss has value for a lot of you, especially Michelle. So really, I don't know what to do here. The Colts do have a tough matchup this week against the Browns at home. So I don't know where you can go and trust either one of these guys. And I still don't know what their plan is with either one of these guys.
Gardner Minshew loves to pass the running back. So that saved
Yeah.
both of them in this game because Moss had 7 targets. Jonathan Taylor had 6. Luckily, I mean, Taylor was very, very inefficient besides he had that one long reception where he had a lot of space to work. He had a 40-yard long reception. That really saved his efficiency on the day. But yeah, I mean, definitely the play time went much more like the gap close. Moss played 50% of the snaps. Jonathan Taylor was at 43%. And I do expect that to flip. Like, I think Taylor will be at the higher with Moss a little bit lower. But Moss still, I mean, he looked good and he did all he could and he got, the goal line carry. I do think they just want to use both of them at this point. So that's unfortunate for Jonathan Taylor, but I do think you can keep throwing them into your lineups. This Cleveland matchup is absolutely brutal. I don't expect them to do great things, but I think both of these guys are playable moving on for fantasy.
Yeah, I just think you have to look at them both as flex plays because you could really get almost nothing, right, from some of these guys in certain matchups.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, as long as Gardner Minshew is going to keep dumping it off, though, and you would expect him to have to do that against the Browns, right? So if you're in a PPR league, I think both Moss and Jonathan Taylor will be fine next week. If you're not in PPR, then it's really going to come down to do one of these guys get the touchdown at like an inch at the inch yard line, right? And that's which one gets it. Is it Jonathan Taylor or is it Zach Moss? Last week or this past yesterday, it was Moss who got it, but it could have just as easily been Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, we'll see how that develops going forward. I wonder if they'll slowly increase Taylor's workload, or I mean, you're right, they could keep it committee-like, and they're fine, even though they paid Taylor. So we've seen other situations where they paid the top running back, but still used the backup guy quite a bit. Now, the Vikings, we saw this as a juicy matchup. At least Jordan Addison scored here, but TJ Hawkinson, KJ Osborne, this Bears defense. The one thing I will say about the Bears defense, they got all their secondary guys back. So they're not bad back there when they have all four guys healthy. So that kind of helped them. But still, the Vikings had trouble with these guys getting open because Jefferson was not demanding attention. And I think it was pretty clear that. So Kirk Cousins, look, if he's going to struggle in a matchup like this, the grind is real. Like it's going to be tough week in, week out. They get the 49ers this week. I don't know if I feel great about Cousins or any of these assets except for Hawkinson this week. I just can't feel it, especially with his offensive line being a little bit banged up and inconsistent against better pass rushing teams. So I don't know, Michelle. I don't know. I think we have to fade the Vikings for a while until Jefferson comes back. And look, Alexander Madison is getting involved. I guess he's okay, putting up decent numbers, but I have to say, I mean, Jefferson has proved why he's so valuable to Minnesota by this result here on Sunday.
Yeah, the only one out of this group that had an okay game was TJ Hawkinson. Like, if you're in a
Yeah.
PPR league, you're fine with TJ Hawkinson's numbers, 6 for 50. Ooh, it's not amazing, but it's
Yeah.
okay. Madison got so many opportunities. You would have thought he did not do anything with them. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown still this year. There's actually not the Vikings as a team have not
Mhm.
scored a rushing touchdown. Akers wasn't involved whatsoever. So that was good to see, I guess, for Madison. But at the same time, maybe the Bears aren't as good of a matchup as we thought. I mean, we loved Brian Robinson last week against the Bears, and he did absolutely nothing. So maybe their defense has gotten a little bit better. You would have liked more all around. I think you should keep throwing in Jordan Addison. He's definitely the guy that has the most upside. KJ
Yeah.
Osborne,
Yeah.
4 receptions,
Yeah.
48 yards. I mean, not
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, not at all. Dare I say they miss Adam Thielen? Adam Thielen is putting
Yeah,
up
right.
massive numbers for the Panthers every week, and they just kind of, okay, bye-bye, Adam. But I think they could really use him now with no Jefferson, and Cousins certainly could. So, well, it's going to be a work in progress as they figure out what to do without Jefferson. Again, 49ers this week is brutal. Now, you mentioned Madison as a struggling running back. Rashad White has not looked good, but there's also some other names. I think White is pretty much, yeah, we've kind of written him off. You saw a little bit of Keyshawn Vaughn with some bursts there with the Buccaneers, but Joe Mixon isn't doing anything. Damian Pierce ceded some key work to Devin Singletary. Najee Harris has been atrocious. He comes back off a bye here. What's up with these? Is it just the scheme, the way they want to operate these offenses? Then we have some situations that are absolutely disasters. Gus Edwards and Justice Hill in Baltimore. Latavius Murray starting ahead of James Cook, and this Buffalo having that scary injury to Damian Harris and the Cardinals. And Amari DeMercado got the most snaps, but all of a sudden it was Keontae Ingram and Damian Williams getting the ball. And then this goes on and on. The Bears were a mess with Dante Foreman, with no Roshan Johnson, Khalil Herbert. The Browns, Jerome Ford was okay early, not great. Broncos now three-headed monster. I don't know, Michelle. It seems like there's so many unplayable running backs where you just play them because you need to fill out RB2, and that's not the way I want to operate fantasy. Like, I'm struggling with RB2 in a lot of leagues this year.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of bad running back play. I mean, you just ran through that. And even with Cleveland, with Jerome Ford having an okay game on the ground, it was Kareem Hunt who was super involved too and stole the touchdown. So it's really hard to figure out which running back to go after in so many of these backfields. And like Joe Mixon is scoring fewer fantasy points per game than Alexander Madison. So it feels like Joe Mixon should be better than that. Like he's on
Yeah.
an offense that's getting together. He's supposed to be the super talented running back, and he's doing absolutely nothing with his work. He's getting like all the snaps with the team. Like it doesn't really make
Yeah.
sense why he's struggling so bad. You just got to, I guess you just don't expect too much from your running back too moving forward. And I think those flex spots should really be filled up with wide receivers. I think that's the key here. Like just find wide receivers that have more higher of a ceiling than these really low ceiling running backs that just don't offer much on any given week.
Yeah, and that's why it was good to just kind of sit on that RB2 because in leagues where I struggle with RB2, part of it is I have Travis Kelce, but I just say, look, he's probably better than my RB2 would have been, and my RB2 just has to put up a little bit more than a tight end would have put up. So you kind of have to
Yeah.
flip your mentality that way, but it's hard to do. You want all your positions in fantasy to come through week in and week out, and it's just not going to be the case because we don't have enough depth to do so. So interesting to look at these backs, but again, it's bye weeks. It's a good transition to what we're going to talk about to close the show here. A lot of buys this week. I don't like to use that word. I won't use it. Well, I will. It's buy-mageddon or whatever. It's what people talk about. But look, 6 teams being off. They're all notable here. Cowboys, Jets, Bengals, Texans, Titans, Panthers. I guess this is a big week. I guess you need to pay attention to the waiver wire and maybe play some of these extended running backs you usually wouldn't, Michelle.
Yeah, we're gonna have to really dig into the waiver wire on tomorrow's show. Like, look up some wide receivers with nice matchups, maybe a higher ceiling, because
Yeah.
it's gonna be a rough going out there. I mean, that's a lot of running backs on a bye. Tony Pollard and Breece Hall and Joe Mixon, who we just brought up, isn't doing much, but you still want to start him. And Derrick Henry and Sheva Hubbard had a solid game.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of running backs on bye. There's a lot of injuries at the quarterback position and wide receiver all over the place. So we're going to have to dig in and do some solid work on tomorrow's show. So make sure you don't miss that because we're going to try to help you get through this brutal week 7.
Yeah, that's what we do here on Mondays in Locked On Fantasy Football. We get you kicked off here with our fantasy football analysis, transition from one week to the next. So really glad you were able to join us today. And again, waiver wire help. We will give you that in depth tomorrow, what you should do without Christian McCaffrey, who you should go after without David Montgomery, and all those quarterbacks that are going down on top of the bye. So a lot of good stuff coming at you there on Tuesday's show every day. And don't forget, we'll break down a running back and quarterback rankings there on Wednesday. We do wide receiver and tight ends on Thursday, and they close the week with our look at DFS for FanDuel and Price Picks. And our Price Picks did really well last week. So they were a sponsor earlier in the show. So excited to talk about them this week as well and give you our Price Picks this week. So that's how we do it here with our progressive known as Locked On Fantasy Football. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.